Josh, my friend, it is December 10th, 2020, and Cyberpunk 2077 is finally out 14 actual months later. I'm Scott Tilford, joined by Josh Brown.
Hello, Scott Tilford. I can't believe this. I've been off for 2 days, 2 simple days, and I come back and you tell me not only is the Cyberpunk Next Gen update out, but apparently it's really, really good and completely transforms the game.
I'm leaning down to turn my volume stuff down, but yes, it's ridiculous. The amount of stuff that they've improved. Obviously, they did a live stream. CDPR got out there and tried to outline a bunch of different things that have been improved overall, but you really don't get a feel for it until you jump into the game itself, because it's the overall flow here that's completely different. There's a confidence to the game overall that wasn't there at launch, and that's not to say that I, for one, didn't enjoy what was there back in 2020. I already have over 100 hours in Cyberpunk, but they've changed so much stuff at a fundamental level, whether it's all the UI stuff, the map, combat balancing with AI works, the feel of the weapons, the vehicles have way better physics. Just literally interacting with the world feels so much better and so much smoother than it did before. And that's alongside, the actual visual upgrade, which brings it way more in line with the PC version as that was in 2020, which is to say that it's an absolutely gorgeous game. We always knew that going in, that a lot of different time and effort had been put into the animations and the literal visuals, but now you can actually see that. You can actually take it in. It's not random, characters not loading, textures bugging out, whatever. It just works. Not to Todd Howard the whole thing, but it just works. I played another 9-ish hours. Most of my day off yesterday was just taken up with Cyberpunk. Sifu, never even heard of her. Get her over there. I'm going back into Cyberpunk 2077, started a new character, started as a nomad this time, and I'm loving it. So just ask me whatever you want. It's a good old time.
This is what I want to know, man, because, both of us actually quite enjoyed Cyberpunk at the time. Yes. I thought it was perhaps more unacceptable because I was getting crashes literally every 30 minutes, but we could both tell that there was something there. I think we both really loved the characters, some of the side quests were incredible, and the entire personality and characterization was really, really cool. There was something there that just needed to be polished. Obviously, it's taken 14 months, but what's interesting, I think, is that you're talking about stuff like the pacing, stuff like, the extra weight to weapons and the cars and stuff. What specifically has been added to this update that isn't just the PC version that everyone liked to begin with back in 2020?
Well, so that's, like I'm saying, it is literal feel stuff. It's literal gameplay tweaks. Like the weapons feel better, they feel chunkier, they feel more differentiable. Same with the vehicles. Also on PlayStation 5, you have all the haptic stuff, so each vehicle feels different, each weapon feels different. But in terms of flow and in terms of gameplay loops, they've overhauled the map stuff. They've made that stuff way clearer. Also, they've overhauled skills. I'll get back to that in a sec. But the map stuff means that because you have a much clearer, much easier to parse out map in regards to where you're supposed to be going and what you're supposed to be doing and why. They always had the idea in the original Cyberpunk of the fixers, where you had different mission givers that were at different spots all around the city, but you didn't really know why you were doing stuff with them. Like at the beginning, you meet Regina, and she's trying to solve all the cyber psychosis stuff, which is their excuse for doing mini bosses out in the world. But the way that stuff is drip fed to you just makes more sense. You don't access all of it at once. One of the biggest issues with the original build of the game was that you had way too much stuff coming at you all at once. You had texts from these characters, they were trying to ring you. Maybe you would go past a different mission trigger in the open world, and that would trigger something else. And it just felt really messy. It felt like all these different disparate things were all descending on you at once. They've polished all that stuff out, so it makes way more sense. It's way more clear to where you should be going and when you should be doing it. And you end up doing that open world thing, kind of like The Witcher 3, where you're on the way to do one mission and you pop up the map, or you maybe see something in the mini-map that just points at like, hey, there's a bounty target over there, or there's a cyber psychosis boss over there, or there's a loot cache over there, or whatever, and you pick those things off as you're on the way to the next thing. And it's not that you couldn't do those things before if you really wanted to, but they're way more clearly shown here. And in regards to, picking up, getting texted off a character, being told that there's a mission available around the corner, or whatever, those things trigger in the right spots now, like their radiuses have been tweaked. Like I said, it feels more confident, and I think in regards to immersion, it all works. Like Cyberpunk at its absolute best was living this life of this insane cyberpunk person in this big city, trying to juggle all these different things that you could do, whether it was text messages, phone calls, missions, weapon upgrades, crafting, whatever, and just trying to take all of those things in. And when Cyberpunk was at its best, those things were juggleable, but it felt messy. Whereas now you take it in a way better pace overall. And like I said, that goes alongside the vehicle stuff, the combat stuff, everything looking so much more beautiful overall. I mean, I'm using the performance mode, so it's like 60 FPS, it's trying to target 4K. Looks very, very good. You should dive back in, and then I'll tell you about skills, because they've changed them too. I'm doing this.
Well, I was just about to talk about skills, to be honest, because it's like you walking down Night City, you're just doing that.
That's me, yeah.
You can't do it in the game, so you're just doing it at work. Yeah, I want to know about the skills, because I liked a lot of Cyberpunk's combat, but the thing was, it threw so many different mechanics at you, through so many different systems, so many different features, that it, like you said, it felt kind of overwhelming to begin with. And a lot of the stuff I kind of ignored or didn't really feel was integral to my experience. The skills especially, I was just kind of like doing it out of obligation rather than because I thought there was anything particularly interesting in there. I unlocked some cool melee attacks, for instance, but even then I just devolved into the gun that did the most damage because that got me through the encounters. I want to know in particular how they've made skills, if they have, more integral to the experience and ultimately more appealing as a feature that you actually want to pursue.
Well, so one thing they said in the live stream, which carries into the game, is that they actually give, if you pick Cyberpunk back up now after the 1.5 patch, they've refunded all your skill points, so you have everything as just a separate allocation, because they've overhauled everything. Like, they've got rid of a whole bunch of perks that were just, plus 5% accuracy or whatever. They've ditched a lot of that stuff so that everything that you're unlocking is more meaningful. And for example, my new character, I'm playing her completely stealth focused. Like, there's a new category called Ninjutsu, which is their new version of stealth, where you're unlocking the ability to throw knives, or you're unlocking the ability to throw stars and you get more damage when you're in stealth or whatever. Some of those things were there before, but because everything is just way tighter now, the AI is so much better in regards to distracting enemies and sneaking up on them. The animations are way better in terms of the takedown stuff, and being able to just confidently, aerial takedowns, you could unlock them before, but they would hardly ever trigger properly. It didn't feel like you could confidently drop in on someone, or be able to take out a bunch of people, hide some bodies, whatever. That whole wing of the game, for me at least, never felt remotely complete back in the day, whereas now it feels very accomplished. And you can also just go all guns blazing and everything looks gorgeous if you go down that route, unlocking various slow motion things, or different things that, buff your cyber abilities, like unleashing the grenades. They've fixed all that stuff. Animations across the board are way upscaled or fixed rather, in regards to like the mantis blades or the, I can't think what you call that wire thing that you get your hands on. But that stuff, all those things that were in there before that just felt a bit messy, they felt a bit flimsy, they now have weight and they now have an actual specific use in combat, because they have rebalanced all those things. So it does feel like you're picking a direction and speccing in that direction. Like, it feels like a stealth build, for example, is something that's way more viable. And when you come across all these different areas in the open world, which, like I said, it goes hand in hand with how they now clear the map up, so it's more clear to you, okay, that's an enemy, that's a bunch of enemies I should take out, that's a side mission that I should walk up to and read a text on the way there so I know what I'm going to be getting into. You then start picking up on, like, okay, there's 5 ways I can get into this building, and if I was spec'd this way, if I had super robotic legs, I could leap up onto the roof and go down through the skylight, or I could charge in guns blazing, I could do whatever. Those things were there before, but it was just that they weren't handled very confidently, or they, in terms of literal, gameplay feel, it just wasn't done with any degree of, you wouldn't want to play it that way. It just felt like you were kind of stumbling through Cyberpunk. It's all that stuff. It's kind of, it is the sum of all of its parts, but those things come together. I think it's worth pointing out at this stage that, Jason Schreier did the report back in 2020, might have been early 2021, talking to CDPR themselves, saying that, what actually went wrong and getting the developer's point of view on it. And they said that they were always aiming for 2022 anyway. They were always hilarious when they were told to drop it in 2020. And obviously on the internal side, they knew that the game just wasn't going to be ready. This feels like what they were always aiming for. This feels like it has that CDPR pedigree across the board. And this just feels like what should have released. And that's an obvious statement to make, but I feel like the dev team were always aiming for this. And it's night and day. Like, it feels like a new game in the vast majority of cases.
I mean, that's really, honestly, for me, that's the most fascinating part, is that, even back when the game first launched, like, the PC version was really well received. Like, that was the thing that reviewers got, obviously, and that was the thing that CDPR was clearly aiming for Cyberpunk to be. Obviously, the console versions fell far short of that. So when the next-gen version was announced, that it was supposed to come last year, then it was delayed, I just assumed that we wouldn't get any proper changes under the hood. It just would be the PC version brought over. But the fact that they've gone in and changed things like skills, changed things like the pace and the way that the map is revealed to you, that's more fascinating to me, and it links to a question that we were asking, way back when we were in the kind of, apex of this thing being a trash fire, and we were kind of wondering, even if CDPR put in the work to, fix the flaws of the game, fix the issues, fix all of the bugs that were there, would what remains even be what the fans wanted to begin with? Would this weird mix of RPG and GTA all-out mayhem even be appealing, or was there something more fundamental to the issues that players had with the game away from just the bug side? So now that you've played this massive update, now that you've played the next-gen version, how do you feel about that side of things? Do you think that this vision of the game is what people wanted to begin with, or worth it to begin with?
That's one thing that to massively shout out is that if you start running down, what have they added? There's a wanted system in here now. There are police chases. You see the police interact with like the different members of the city itself. Like you'll see different crimes going down, which again, there were some crimes going down in the original, but the police just looked brain dead for the most part when you were playing that original. Now there is a wanted system. They'll chase after you. You have to try and evade them for a certain amount of time, get out of their vision cones to make it go away. Drones come after you more frequently. It feels like there is an actual police presence overall. Also, you can change your appearance now whenever you want. You just look in the mirror in the apartment. You can also buy apartments now. That wasn't a thing before. It feels like they've added quite a few. They've also added tons of like individual animations for those apartments. If you buy the one in Japantown, you can just sit and play your guitar whenever you want. You can actually play the songs that you play as Johnny later in the story whenever you want. They've also like fleshed out. They've added way more scenes with all the individual romances, whether that's River, Panam, Judy, whatever. You can do more stuff with that. It's just all those things, because there was that whole thing, like you said, there was that big disparity between the way Cyberpunk was being advertised, which was this GTA adjacent thing in a Cyberpunk city, which very much, if you look into the history of the game, the reports came from Adam Badowski wanting to chase the GTA dollar, or it seems like that was the case, and a lot of different things were sidelined because of that, hence why the likes of Witcher 3's game director, who was working on the game, left to go and do their own thing. Things like that changed over time. Because there is a wanted system, because there is intelligent AI in the city, and because you can get lost in that side of it, you are in this open space where you can go cause carnage, and you can have those dynamic things where you're taking on one of the gangs, and all of a sudden the police run in because they're just responding to the fact that they're firing at you, and you get that sort of GTA, Skyrim-esque dynamic AI overlapping thing, which the older version of Cyberpunk could barely hold. Like most of the time it would crash, or that just wouldn't happen, or whatever. That side of stuff is definitely upticked. I think in regards to the story, I always liked the way the story played out. I like the whole comment on giving in to augments and this fake version of yourself and getting back to the real you at the end, and who do you want to be, and all these different multiple endings and all that kind of stuff. For me, there was always enough meat on those bones anyway, but I think that the way that they go into the game, the fact that overall there is just such a confidence in the way that all the side missions and the overall world is handled. Like I said, it feels like the most opulent, confident, detailed open world ever made that is finally actually accessible as an individual in that space. Like you're not just being bombarded. It feels like you can take all these things on, and they fold into each other really, really well. There's always one more thing around the corner that you could do, whilst you are also, doing main missions whenever you want. So I think all that stuff really comes together, and some of the biggest requests or the biggest problems, like the police stuff, have been fixed.
I guess my final ultimate question is, it seems like it's in a state now where it's recommendable, right? And the issue I always had with Cyberpunk is that my experience with it was so much of a roller coaster, so frustrating as well as great, that I couldn't recommend it to my friends or anyone. I couldn't say like this is worth it because there was too many caveats. So I would always say, when it's fixed, when some patches come out, then you can play it. Now seems, correct me if I'm wrong, like the time for people who may have been holding off to jump in, which leads to my final question, which is, it's at a current state now. Do you think this is a state where they begin to move on? Do they keep fixing things? Do they keep adding things? Or do we have a moment now where this patch is out, this next-gen update is out, and now do they start to work on the DLC that they had planned, for instance?
So they've already said that they are doing more patches. Like their Twitter is just incredibly just like, no, we're not doing that anymore. We're focusing on this. They confirmed they're not doing the underground subway stuff, which was like some fans wanted that stuff. They just said, like, just to be completely brazenly honest, we're not doing that. But they do have an ongoing live updated list of what's going to be in the next patch, so they're already working towards patch 1.6. But yes, this is very much the version of the game you can just give someone. Like, I very much love the original game. I played it on PS5, which is a way better version than if you played it on anything the generation beforehand. And so I always really liked this game. I always think that it was a phenomenal core to it. It was just that it was rough around the edges, which is always the same with No Man's Sky. They've both charted a similar course, but it's not a one-to-one. But this is very much the game that you can give people. I think that there's enough core improvements across the board, and that you don't need to have those caveats. You can just go, here is Cyberpunk, you'll get it. If you give it to someone, you'll get why it's a big deal. I haven't tried the Corpo life path yet, because that was always the one of the 3 starting paths that was a bit too short, and a lot of people were just like, this game was clearly written for you as a street kid, because of like between Street Kid, Corpo, and Nomad. That was one of the biggest sort of qualms, was that the opening life paths don't actually deviate that much once they dovetail together and the story just goes forward regardless. Nomad and Street Kid largely line up with that, so in terms of an overall story thing that you could potentially put your wrong foot into, starting as a Corpo might still not be as satisfying as doing the Street Kid Nomad stuff. But across the board, it feels like 14 months of just head down, I mean, potentially a hell of a lot of crunch, just looking over the amount of different things they can tweak. Like, there's entire story scenes that are now relit and redone to make sure that they land properly, to change the mood around or whatever, to have darker lighting when Johnny is taking over your mind for the first time, things like that. It really feels like they reapproached it, or that this just is the version of the game that needed 2 extra years worth of development.
Totally. I mean, what you said there about the Corpo thing is really fascinating, because that was one of my major drawbacks at the time. I did Corpo because I was trying to chart this thing of, being this bootlicker essentially and going, punk, like the title suggests. But that all happened within the space of that first 6-month kind of montage that you get, and I was a little bit disappointed after that. So it's interesting that they have changed some of the scenes around, that they have, like you said, tweaked the lighting to make the atmosphere more pronounced. I don't think in its current form it's going to be enough to get me personally back in. Like, I enjoyed my 70 hours with it, but I also have too many bad memories attached to that experience. But if they do, release more patches, maybe add more content to the game, it might get to the point where, people who have already played it, like me, are in this kind of situation where they look back kind of fondly and kind of not, go back and reappraise it. Because, like you said, there is so much to love in this game, even in its form 2 years ago, and to see that be able to shine on its own without the caveats, without all of these blemishes taking it down, like, that is ultimately something to be championing.
Honestly, like, I genuinely think, even just as a curio, like, you own this version, it's a free update, and also for people who don't own it, there's a 5-hour free trial on both platforms, so they just want to get it in front of people, so you can see what it is. But yeah, I would massively recommend this. I think even just as a curio, to be like, how much have they changed, whether you start a new save or just dive back into your old one, they've fixed a hell of a lot of it. I still love that original version of the game, and obviously we talked about it a hell of a lot across the last 2 years, but this is this feels like a confident, this is what Cyberpunk should be. And I feel like as an overall package, like, the production value is sky high now, and it just feels like you can give that to people and go, this is what the team that made The Witcher 3 did. And it's just like, it's a shame that you're never going to be able to escape the reality of what happened 2 years ago, and then it did take 14 months to put together. But this is a great game, and I think that it always was. It's just that now those edges are smoothed, and it's very much recommendable. But let us know what you think down in the comments below of Cyberpunk 2077. Did you play it back in the day, or are you going to pick it up with the new upgrades? What are you potentially thinking about the whole state of the whole thing? For now, I've been Scott from WhatCulture.com.
I've been Josh from WhatCulture.com.
And we'll catch you next time.
Bye-bye.